Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
On a quiet night, David arrives home after a long day at work. He finds Emily, his wife, preparing dinner, and for a moment, he feels grateful for the stable life they have built together. They have been married for 7 years, with no children, but share a solid routine and mutual respect that has always kept them united. David feels they make a good team. He is a dedicated lawyer, always meticulous and detail-oriented. She is a passionate doctor who spends most of her days caring for patients and dealing with the complexity of life and death. However, on that night, something in the air feels different. Emily is thoughtful, distracted as she stirs the pot. David, used to observing people's behavior, notices her distant gaze and feels a subtle discomfort, a feeling he can't explain. He watches her in silence, waiting for her to look him in the eyes, but Emily seems hesitant. Then, without much introduction, she finally breaks the silence and utters a phrase that completely catches him off guard. "David, Michael is in town. Would you mind if I met him for coffee?" The question hangs in the air, and the impact is immediate. David's heart skips a beat, and his mind goes on high alert. He knows that name well, Michael, Emily's ex-boyfriend. He knew Michael had been an important figure in her life before they met, but he never wanted to hear the details. All he knew was that they had ended tumultuously, with heated arguments and unresolved feelings. Still, it was in the past, and he always trusted that the ghosts of that story wouldn't return to haunt the present. David takes a deep breath, trying to understand the reason behind this request. Always rational and balanced, his first reaction is to try to see the positive side. Maybe it's just a casual meeting. Maybe she just wants to close a chapter that was left open. But at the same time, a growing discomfort takes hold of him. He knew Michael's reputation, a charming man who, despite being married, had a history of infidelities and secret affairs. David couldn't help but think about the risk such a meeting could bring, especially since he knew how complicated their breakup had been. With a firm but calm voice, he tries to express his feelings. "Emily, it's not that I want to control your decisions," he says, carefully choosing his words, "but I feel uncomfortable with this idea. You ended things in a complicated way, and I have my reservations about him. Why do you want to see him?" Emily, with an almost indifferent expression, responds, "It's just coffee, David. Michael is passing through town, and I thought it wouldn't hurt. But, if it bothers you, I can back out." The ease with which she agrees leaves David conflicted. He expected more resistance, perhaps an attempt to justify the meeting. But, on the other hand, he feels a momentary relief. She seems to understand, and, in a carefree tone, goes back to preparing dinner as if the matter no longer mattered. This simple response should make him feel at ease, right? But that's not how David feels. Something inside him remains restless, like a premonition that this night is only beginning to stir the first waves of a storm. He observes Emily, now focused on preparing dinner, and tries, unsuccessfully, to shake off the feeling that something much bigger is coming. In the days following that conversation, David tries to return to his usual routine. He convinces himself that Emily accepted his request not to meet Michael, and that the matter is resolved. But deep down, something persists, an unsettling feeling lodged in his mind that won't leave him in peace. He notices that, although she easily agreed not to see her ex-boyfriend, Emily begins to exhibit behaviors that don't match the woman he knows so well. First, it's her schedule that starts to change. Before, Emily always sent a message when she finished work, letting him know she was on her way home. It was such a natural habit between them that David barely noticed, until it stopped happening. Now, there are days when she sends brief messages saying she'll be working late or that an emergency came up at the hospital. He tries to ignore it, convincing himself that maybe she's facing new pressures at work. Still, he can't shake off the idea that there's something more behind these changes. One night, David sees her come home later than usual. He's sitting on the couch, waiting for her, and when he hears the door open, he looks up with discreet anticipation. Emily enters with a tired smile, dropping her bag on the table, but seems a little uncomfortable. He carefully watches her, analyzing her movements, her expressions, looking for something that explains his own discomfort. David always believed he knew Emily better than anyone, but that night she seems a bit distant, and he feels a weight in the air, something invisible, but impossible to ignore. She mutters something about being tired from the day and goes straight to the shower, leaving him alone with his thoughts. He tries to dismiss his insecurity, but his mind returns to the idea of Michael. Could that meeting she promised to avoid actually be happening? His mind begins to question every detail, every small change in Emily's behavior. Why would she alter her messaging routine? Why the sudden late nights, and more than anything, why does he feel she's not being completely honest? The next night, another situation reinforces his suspicions. Emily says she will be at the hospital covering a colleague's shift. David, who always trusted her without question, feels his heart tighten at hearing the excuse. He doesn't know if it's paranoia or instinct, but something is wrong. He tries to act normally, but realizes that, instead of feeling relieved by her answers, each new excuse only makes him more suspicious. Even her voice sounds different, as if she's hiding something. Days later, David has a meeting that allows him to go home earlier than expected. He decides not to tell Emily, planning to surprise her with dinner. But upon arriving, he finds the house empty and silent. None of the lights are on, and there's no sign that Emily has been there recently. He sends her a casual message asking about her day, but doesn't receive an immediate response, which is even stranger. Sitting in the dark living room, he stares into the emptiness around him and feels a shiver run down his spine. Emily, the woman he trusted without reservation, is becoming a mystery before his eyes. Each passing day, the uncertainty grows, transforming into a suffocating presence, like a shadow surrounding him without rest. David's rationality begins to give way to a protective instinct, an impulse that tells him he needs to act before something even more devastating happens. He finds himself thinking about how he can uncover the truth, if there is indeed something hidden. This doubt consumes him, robbing him of sleep and the peace that once filled his quiet life. The idea that Emily might be seeing Michael, despite her promise to the contrary, corrodes every part of his trust, until he feels like a stranger in his own home. David decides to confront his suspicions in a different way. He chooses to wait and observe, giving Emily the chance to show if she's really being honest. So, on that day, he leaves work early and goes straight to the hospital where she works. He parks his car in a strategic spot, from where he can see the entrance without being noticed. He checks his watch repeatedly, counting the minutes. She had said it would be a busy night, that she'd be staying late to cover a colleague's shift. But something in her voice, the way she said goodbye that morning, left him with a strange feeling, a certainty that something wasn't right. David takes a deep breath, feeling the tension grow with each passing minute. He knows that if she's telling the truth, she won't leave there anytime soon. But if she's lying, she'll leave shortly after her usual shift ends, and then he'll finally have an answer. Time drags on, and David feels overwhelmed by anxiety. He recalls all the small signs, the changes in Emily's behavior, the excuses for coming home late. Doubt pounds in his mind, and he tries to convince himself that he's being paranoid, that maybe she's just tired from work. Still, he refuses to leave without certainty. When the clock marks the end of Emily's shift, David holds his breath and carefully observes the hospital entrance. And then, to his surprise and despair, he sees her come out. Emily walks through the main door wearing casual clothes and with a calm expression, as if it were just another day. She looks around for a moment, as if wanting to make sure no one is nearby, and then quickly walks toward her car. David feels his heart sink. All his doubts seem confirmed, but he needs to see where this will lead. Carefully, he starts his car and follows her from a safe distance, trying to maintain a reasonable gap so she doesn't notice. She drives calmly, without hurry, as if heading to a planned meeting, and David feels his chest tighten with unbearable pain. A few minutes later, she parks in front of a discreet restaurant, and without delay, gets out of the car. David stops at a safe distance, watching as she waits, checking her watch with an anticipatory look. Then he sees Michael approaching. It's him, the ex-boyfriend Emily said she wouldn't meet. The man David feared might be more than just a memory from the past. They share a quick but familiar hug, and then enter the restaurant together. David watches in silence, feeling a mix of anger and disappointment. He realizes this isn't just a casual meeting. The familiarity between them is obvious, and everything he feared begins to unfold before his eyes. Still, he holds back, remaining in the car, waiting to see how far this lie will go. After some time, Emily and Michael leave the restaurant, now even closer. She laughs at something he says, and they get into Michael's car together. The pain David feels is almost unbearable, but he remains firm and continues following them, determined to uncover the whole truth. Every mile seems to destroy a part of his life. Finally, the car stops in front of a motel, and Emily and Michael get out together, entering the place without hesitation. David watches, stunned, as his wife walks through that door with another man. The impact is devastating. All the trust he placed in her now seems like an illusion, something fragile shattered by the weight of betrayal. David feels an indescribable heaviness as he watches Emily enter the motel with Michael. He stays there, watching the door close, and with it, the trust and security he felt in his marriage. His world seems to collapse, but he takes a deep breath, forcing himself to remain calm. He needs more than just the sight of her crossing that door, he needs proof. Then, his instincts lead him to an unexpected plan. He picks up the phone and, with forced calm, begins drafting a message. She can't know he's there, and he wants her to betray herself. Typing quickly, he writes a cold, almost professional message: "Emily, I need to talk to you urgently. I'm in front of the hospital." He waits, and the silence stretches for a few seconds that feel eternal. He wonders if she'll respond, but suddenly his phone vibrates. It's a message from her: "I can't write right now, David. I'm with patients. It'll take a while." Her blatant and direct lie feels like a stab to the heart. He takes a deep breath, feeling the pain mixed with a cold, calculated anger. Her voice echoes in his mind, insisting she's with patients, and he must gather all his strength not to succumb to the urge to scream, to confront her at that moment. Instead, he decides to keep his discretion and responds, maintaining a balanced tone: "All right, I'll wait at the entrance until you're done." He finishes the message and watches the motel entrance with a patience he didn't know he possessed. He knows this message planted a seed of panic in her, and he's willing to wait as long as necessary to see the result. David remains there, motionless, his eyes fixed on the entrance, and within a few minutes, he sees the result of his plan. The motel door opens, and Emily comes out in a hurry with Michael. Her face is marked by tension, her eyes restless, as if searching for something or someone. It's as if she knows what she's doing is wrong, but still tries to rationalize her actions. When he sees her there, at the motel entrance, David feels a mix of disgust and, at the same time, a kind of liberation. Finally, the whole truth is exposed, and he no longer needs to live with doubts and uncertainties. She looks around, clearly nervous, until, in an instant, their eyes meet. She freezes upon seeing him across the street, silently watching her. David maintains a steady gaze, without reaction, as if all the emotions inside him are hidden behind a cold mask of indifference. He doesn't need to say anything, and Emily seems to understand everything in a second. Her expression changes from surprise to something close to despair, and she starts walking toward him, her eyes pleading for a chance to explain. But David doesn't allow space for explanations. Without a single word, he turns his back and walks away, leaving her standing still, immobile, between the motel and the emptiness of her own choices. David gets into his car, firmly closes the door, and drives away without looking back. The image of Emily paralyzed on the sidewalk is etched in his mind like an indelible mark. He drives through the city streets without a clear destination, driven only by the need to distance himself from that place, from that betrayal. Each mile traveled brings with it an avalanche of memories of the moments they built together, now shattered, as if they meant nothing. He feels a mix of anger, sadness, and, above all, a void that seems to consume every part of his soul. The night passes, and he can't go home immediately. The place that once meant safety now seems strange, stained by the memory of betrayal. He stops at a hotel, a modest place far from his neighborhood, and decides that's where he'll spend the night. After checking in, he enters the room and sits on the bed, looking at the empty walls, unsure of what to do. David picks up his phone and sees several missed calls and messages from Emily, all begging him to listen, to give her a chance to explain. He doesn't respond to any of them. The sense of betrayal, of seeing his love so easily discarded, consumes him. He reads her messages, each word filled with empty excuses and justifications. She begs, saying she made a mistake, that he needs to give her a chance to explain, but to him, it all seems like a hastily constructed lie, an attempt to cover up something that is already as clear as day. That night, he can't sleep. His mind replays every detail of their relationship, analyzing all the times he believed she was sincere, that her love was genuine. He wonders how many other lies she may have hidden, how many other nights she may have spent with Michael or anyone else. The doubt consumes him, turning every happy memory into a painful unanswered question. The next morning, David makes a decision. He knows it can't be delayed. He goes back home, determined to close this chapter once and for all. Upon entering, everything is exactly as he left it, but now the atmosphere feels different, almost strange. He notices how those walls, once full of meaning, now feel empty, stripped of the life they shared. He gathers his things, packing each item into a suitcase with the same cold determination he used to confront her the night before. Photos, clothes, objects that once represented their story now become mere reminders of a farce. David doesn't leave anything behind that could bring back memories of that betrayal. Each folded piece of clothing feels like a part of the past he decides to tear out of his life without hesitation. Emily arrives home in the middle of this process, her face marked by anxiety, her desperate gaze. She tries to approach, trying to explain, but he doesn't bother to listen. With every sentence she begins, he remains silent, avoiding looking at her directly, as if he were a stranger in his own home. When he finishes packing, David lifts his head and looks at her. His eyes are cold, as if she were merely an acquaintance, someone he briefly glimpsed. He opens the door and, without saying a single word, crosses the threshold of the house that now belongs solely to her and the void she created. He leaves there with his head held high, certain that there's nothing more to say, and leaves behind not just a house, but also a love that turned out to be an illusion. David drives to the hotel with his suitcases, leaving behind the home he built with Emily and everything he once believed was a solid and true life. His mind is full of conflicting thoughts, but one idea begins to take shape, a decision born out of a sense of justice, an almost uncontrollable impulse to close this story with one last truth revealed. While in the hotel room, he recalls every detail of that night, Emily's coldness in lying to him and the way she interacted with Michael, as if David were irrelevant. Something inside him drives him to seek justice, not to cause pain, but to bring the truth to light, as if it could somehow balance things. At that moment, he decides to do something he never imagined. He searches through the photos on his phone and selects the image of Emily and Michael entering the motel together, indisputable proof of the betrayal. With calmness and precision, he opens social media and begins searching for information about Michael. It doesn't take long to find Laura's profile, Michael's wife. She appears to be a kind woman, with a warm smile in the photos she posts alongside Michael, family moments and trips, a life that, to any observer, seems full of happiness and trust. David feels a heaviness seeing that, knowing how similar it was to the life he thought he had until just a few days ago. Still, he knows it's the right thing to do. Laura deserves to know the truth, just as he had to face it. He writes a short and direct message, attaching the photo he took that painful night. Each word is carefully measured, as he understands the weight of what he's doing. He imagines himself in her place, receiving such devastating news, and feels a mix of sadness and relief, as if he's finally closing the last page of a bitter chapter. Minutes after sending the message, he steps away from the phone, feeling an odd inner peace. He doesn't expect a response, nor does he wish to prolong the matter. For him, it's enough that the truth has been told, that Laura has the chance to know who she's married to and can make her own decisions from there. It's a burden he carries with some bitterness, but with the firmness of knowing he did the right thing. The next day, David is awakened by the sound of notifications on his phone. Among the many messages Emily continues to send, there's a response from Laura. He hesitates for a moment but ends up opening the message. Laura thanks him for his honesty and says that, although the news was devastating, she's grateful to finally know what was going on. In her words, he senses pain, but also an unexpected strength. Laura mentions that she has already made her decision and doesn't plan to give Michael another chance to lie. Upon reading those words, David feels that his decision brought closure not only for him but also for someone who, like him, was deceived by those they trusted most. After all the turmoil that consumed him, David feels it's time for a complete fresh start. He spends the following days alone in the hotel, dealing with a mix of emotions, while organizing what's left of his life. Determined to turn the page, he makes one of the most important decisions of his life, to move to a new city. Since he was young, he dreamed of living near the sea, in a quiet town where the sound of the waves could be a balm for his soul and where the open horizon invited new beginnings. With this renewed desire, he finally finds the courage to make it a reality. Without hesitation, he researches coastal towns, places where life seems simpler and routines are governed by the rhythm of nature. The idea of walking barefoot on the sand, feeling the sea breeze on his face, brings a glimpse of the peace he so desires. In a few days, he organizes everything he needs, wraps up commitments, and signs the final divorce papers, the definitive end of a chapter marked by pain and disillusionment. Arriving in the new city is more liberating than he imagined. He chooses a small, cozy apartment with a wide view of the sea. Each morning feels like a rebirth, a chance to rewrite his story far from all the memories of the past. David realizes that, for the first time in a long while, he's living for himself, rediscovering interests and dreams he had set aside in the rush of marriage and an exhausting routine. Gradually, he begins to establish a new routine: morning walks along the beach at sunrise, runs on the boardwalk, coffee at small local spots where he feels part of a community. He meets new people, forms casual friendships, and finds a peace he had never experienced before. The void that once consumed him begins to be replaced by a serenity he thought unattainable. Over time, the memories of Emily and the betrayal become less painful, like scars that, though present, no longer hurt as they once did. He learns to live with them, to see them as part of a life that no longer belongs to him. The ocean, with its vastness, seems to absorb the last traces of his sadness, and he begins to see the future with a lightness that once seemed impossible. David fully embraces this new life, exploring every corner of the city, every possibility that freedom offers. Gradually, he feels whole again, rediscovering who he truly is without the weight of past disappointments. The days pass, and David finds a calm balance in his new routine. He gets involved with the local community, meets people who lead simple but profound lives, and gradually rediscovers the beauty in small things. Life by the sea has brought him a clarity he hadn't experienced in years. Over time, he feels stronger, more at peace, as if the salt of the sea had washed away all traces of the pain he left behind. On a quiet afternoon, while sitting at an outdoor cafe, watching the ebb and flow of the waves, David receives an unexpected message from an old friend, someone who still keeps in touch with Emily. Reluctantly, he opens the message and, upon reading it, feels a mix of surprise and strange indifference. Emily, the woman he once loved deeply, has fallen into depression since the divorce. She seems to have sunk into regret and sadness, spending entire days isolated and in silence. David sits there, looking at the phone, absorbing the words without the pain he thought he might feel. The impact that the news would have caused before now feels like a distant echo. He realizes this information no longer affects him as it might have in the past, as if it were someone else's story, a closed and locked chapter of the past. He reflects for a few minutes, his eyes lost in the blue horizon. He wonders if he should feel something stronger, a desire to try to help, to extend a hand to someone who was once his partner. But he doesn't feel that. He has freed himself from the chains of that relationship and now sees that sometimes life's lessons come through pain and separation. Everyone must face the consequences of their actions, and Emily is facing hers. Taking a deep breath, he puts the phone back in his pocket and lifts his gaze to the sea, which stretches infinitely before him. The waves break softly, one after another, as if affirming that life follows its natural course. He understands that this peace, this new life he has built with so much effort, can no longer be affected by the past. He did everything he could, stayed true to himself, and now he's where he needs to be. David stands up and walks toward the beach, his feet sinking into the warm sand. The breeze touches his face, and he closes his eyes, letting the sea completely envelop him. Now, he knows he has found what he was looking for, a life where he is true to himself, a life where the pain of the past has become lessons, a distant memory that no longer interferes with the present. And with every step he takes, he feels freer, more complete. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.